thanks. We're talking here a little bit about our countries. No problem. Hi, Elisa. Welcome.
Are you related, the two of you, or is that simply a common family name?
I don't know. Sorry, I think I don't understand your question.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I had my phone muted.
Uh,
You mean about Ferreira?
Yes.
The last it's very common.
Ferreira is
Yeah.
also my surname. My surname is Ferreira also.
Yeah. So we are not related. Yeah. It's just very common.
Yes, for sure.
So
Where are
you
you
have the
from?
same tradition like in Spain. Your name Blanco, is that your mother's name?
Oh, no, my last name is from my father, but the second last name is from my mother. That is Ferreira. But the last one is Branco. It means white. It's Blanco in Spanish also. It came from Spanish. Elisa, where are you from?
I'm from Brasilia, in the capital,
Yes.
but now I live in Germany.
Um, how is the temperature there?
Actually, it's pretty pleasant. It's around 20,
Yeah.
so it's a pleasant summer, in my opinion. Yeah.
Here
I-
we're in cold here in Brazil, no? We're very cold compared to Germany.
Yeah. Yeah, but I used to live in Canada. I lived there for 6 years, so 20 is really pleasant. But for
Where did you
Brazil,
live in
it's
Canada?
winter. Yeah,
Where did you live in Canada?
in Montreal.
That's where I'm from.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, it's amazing. I really like your city.
In Saint Laurent. I don't know if you know. It's
I know. I walked around a bit after I was 6 years. So,
so
oh,
where
that
did
is
you live exactly?
what? Sorry.
Where did you live exactly?
I live downtown because I studied at McGill.
I also studied at McGill, but I
Oh,
guess
right.
a long time before you, I guess.
That is so nice. So good to hear. Oh my god. Yeah, so it's my preferred place in the entire world. I was there last week in a conference at UDM. So,
Yeah. Did you go to
Okay.
Schwartz for a sneak peek sandwich?
of course, I miss that so much. And poutine. So where are you now?
Now I live in France, in the center of France, about 200 kilometers from Paris.
What is the name?
It's called Nancy. Observatory nearby.
Oh, okay, nice.
Used to work there, but now I work in the city in Paris, so I commute.
How many hours?
It's about an hour and a half, but
Okay,
I don't go in every day.
I understand. Yeah, I was also in Paris 2 weeks ago for the Cosmic Day.
Oh,
I
you
don't know.
were
You were
I
not
was
there?
there briefly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so I missed you.
No, I wasn't registered for the conference, but I came one day before lunch,
Oh, okay.
and I met a friend for lunch, and I saw the last few talks of the morning
Oh, I see.
on the Wednesday.
I see. a lot of people from Paris didn't come because they thought there was no air conditioning. But
Yeah, well, I've been in that room before,
Yeah.
in that auditorium, and it's very hot.
yeah, so I have many friends like you that since they know that it's very hot, they didn't come. But the surprise was that they installed overnight an air conditioning. So it was livable. Yeah.
Lisa, you studied with Dr. Alex, right?
Alex, sorry?
Winch?
Lynch.
No,
No?
no. So I did my undergrad at the University of São Paulo with Raul Abramo. And
Sorry.
then I went to McGill to study with Robert Bernberg.
Sorry, I confused it. So,
Yeah, now I'm the new professor at the University of São Paulo.
oh!
Yeah.
Are you going back?
You were the contest of the Xavier, right? You get first.
Yeah.
Well, for bingo, specific for bingo, right?
It was observational cosmology.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did not have to do with bingo. We had a lot of people there actually participating.
There's people working on Chime for the Fast Radio Bursts at McGill, right? For Vicky Caspi's group.
Can you repeat? Sorry, I think my internet connection.
For people at McGill who work on Chime,
Yeah,
Fast Radio Bursts.
yeah,
Vicky Caspi and her group.
yeah, Vicky. Yeah, I was with Vicky and Matt last week. Matt Goff. Yeah, yeah. I'm not part of Chime. Seeing everything and seeing each of those efforts being discovered, which is amazing. Yeah. Vicky put a lot of money there, right, to make the Chime to be able to see the FRBs.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
It's the McGill proposal for the whole back end.
yeah, yeah.
Well, maybe once a year.
Back in the summer or the winter?
I prefer to avoid the summer.
Me too. It's super hot.
But it's also the time when there's all the festivals.
Exactly. I was there and it was the jazz festival. So imagine how the city was. Yeah, that's why I didn't meet a lot of them. They were all traveling or enjoying the festival. Yeah, but now they hired a lot of intermediate people, right?
It's not me.
Yeah. Yeah. We have been talking about doing this 21 centimeter collective or something group, so I hope they hire more people. Were you there in the last Cinca, or you participating for the position?
When they hired who?
When they hired Cynthia?
Cynthia. I don't. What's her name?
It's Cynthia Shane. Oh, I don't know her last name. Let me check.
Well, I wasn't. haven't been looking for a position, so I haven't kept in touch.
Oh,
with
I
them.
see. Two. They hired people from 21 centimeters.
I'm a bit too old. They want to hire young people now.
Oh, that,
The young people on
Yeah.
the faculty positions.
yeah. So yeah, they hired. Oh my God, I'm probably.
Is that who you're talking about?
Exactly. And
Chelsea.
really, she really views this premise. She really. Also, with her came her husband. Oh, the website is not open.
Let's see, she does H1 intensity mapping, I guess.
Yeah.
It's
Also,
been paid. Oh, she's part of Hyrax, right?
she's part of Hyrax, exactly. Also came Jonathan Sievers.
Him I know, yeah.
Yeah,
He's originally from South Africa, I think.
yeah. And he was more CNB, right? I think now that he's CNB.
He was the PI for Hyrax. I'm not sure if he still is because he's at McGill now.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It must have been a big blow for the group in South Africa.
Oh, I see. So they lost everybody.
Well, they lost Jonathan.
Yeah, Jonathan, yeah. Yeah, but he was very happy. And also Adrian Lee was also hired. So yeah, they hired
A lot of people on 21 centimeter cosmology. Matt Dobbs he's in that area, yeah? Or is he-
Yeah, but also CMB, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but I think Chime is the biggest project at the moment. Yeah, those are very. I left McGill last October, but it has been really exciting time.
So with Bingo, you will work also when you get to Lusky. You
Yes.
said it will be 1 year, right?
I'm going to be out for 2 years. I always go back 2021.
So
Yeah,
you
the first semester.
to operate the telescope, right? When you start to work with the guys, will be during the operation or commission, right?
Yeah. I'm involved since the beginning, but really beginning. I was, but I'm more theoretical, so yeah, the things that are, yeah, now we are in the pipeline. So I'm already involved, but for sure when I come back, I'll be more involved.
Oh, for sure. So
Yeah.
you're working on the pipeline. No.
Yes, I'm trying to help as much as I can. Yeah.
No, I can't help you guys with science or anything. Yeah, I'm from the management and system engineering side, so
Oh,
I'm the side that does nothing, you know?
no, come on.
No, we're trying to help to organize the things and map all the work that must be done.
I
And
see.
but I'm from the science and space and earth science coordination here actually. So and I work on the project management office. So we have a lot of projects, and I spent some time with people, but we need a dedicated person to a project of such kind, and we're searching this person right now.
I see.
We have the fellowship already approved, but we lost the guy that we worked on this, so we're searching.
I see.
And in near future, we hope to have a person talking with everybody, and maybe it will interface with you and everybody that's working to help to program.
Discussion session about things we saw today. It's open. I hope so. Are you listening to me?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to start with one question that is important for the telescope. We have discussed a lot, which is, and I would like to hear the opinion of the specialists about full correlation receiver versus radiometer. We actually in the beginning I was very skeptical about radiometers, and then I found the solution that Alex discussed quite nice, but I'm not specialist on this area, so I would like to hear from you, Jeff, Jacques, Zulema, Rodrigo, what's...
Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about this. I've always been impressed with the Bingo project as an intensity mapper, as the most likely to succeed of all the telescopes in the world, because the system has been built with no compromises. use a single dish telescope under illuminate with a very high quality corrugated feed, use Dragon optics, spend the money for the 2 large reflectors. This is the best design that CMB observers have developed for many, many decades. And adopting that from CMB and bringing it to intensity mapping. So I think that attitude should continue right to the end. We make no compromises and we do the best thing we can do. And that attitude has you using the correlation receiver. Correlation receiver will work better. It will remove gain drifts to a very high degree and allow you a very wide field of observation. So I think that it's a mistake late in the project to find a cheaper path that might work, and that what you should do is follow the original plan and take the best path. So that is my suggestion. Yeah. Even if it's fewer feeds. If you get high quality data with a smaller number of feeds, there'll be the money to buy more feeds.
I'm sorry, I don't hear.
What about now?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Comment afterwards.
So I want to make just a comment, and I would like to hear my colleagues if it's worth it, because they have this dilemma, right? If they should go with a simpler radiometer or a correlation receiver, and I think the colleagues they do prefer the correlation receivers, but is there any added value if when you choose the correlation receiver, you still pick up a few simple radiometers, and then you compare the data in the sense that they do not share the same systematic errors. And when you go for calibrating your system, maybe it's wise to rely on 2 different technologies that will complement your calibration and make it stronger. I still believe that for the science case, you want to rely on the correlation receivers, but for calibration, you do get some extra information from a simpler design, a simpler radiometer, which for sure will be easier to handle the systematics. Maybe you want to have a system where most of them are cross correlation, and just for for calibration purpose, you have a simpler design, a few of them. I remember, for instance, for Planck, we had a very complicated thermal environment. It was a nightmare, and we had blind bolometers that basically, the only thing you would expect from them was to cross-correlate with the thermal noise, and then you would, take that in consideration. Maybe it's a question, right? Since you have all these horns, and I believe even in the best case scenario, you still don't have all the budget to put the receiver in every single horn. Maybe you can separate some of these horns and put a simpler design.
Elisa is going to comment something?
I would like to comment, Steve.
Okay.
Is that okay? So I agree with everything that Jeff said. I think, as some of you know already, because I sent a mail during the lunch break saying similar things. I really believe that the big advantage of Bingo is the really tight optical design and the high control over the optics. And but it's not enough to have well-behaved hardware. You have to know what the behavior is, and you have to implement that knowledge into your software. So I agree with Jeff that you should stick to the uncompromising architecture and go with it right from the beginning, because all of the software, your signal processing, data processing, and calibration, all that relies on software, and it should be developed right from the beginning with the plan and not be interrupted by different stages which require different software to do the measurement. I mentioned also in my mail about RFI. I'm a bit worried that you haven't considered RFI. I know you can do very well to control artificial transmitters in the region, but you can't do anything about the overhead satellites. And nowadays there are really very many of them. You can take a snapshot at, for example, 1227 megahertz, and you'll see multiple transmitters in the sky from the GPS cluster or from some of the others like, the other navigation satellites. So be aware that your LNA has to have the dynamic range to deal with that, and that's an enormous dynamic range. Or else you have to filter the transmission bands of these satellites. And they're not all perfectly well behaved and staying within their band, so you have to think about that too. But in general, just to repeat, I agree with Jeff that you should stick with the original plan and not be sidetracked by some kind of, I don't know, running for quick science.
Well, I said it in the morning. I would like to see a real correlator and a real receiver as they were presented here and compared in the lab. Because Jacques already said that, well, one of the suppositions is that the gain of the two branches of the correlator are the same, and really I don't think they are. So I think it's important to have a prototype and see how it works before taking any decision.
You seem to have switched off the microphone.
Okay. But let's say we don't really know the cost, especially if you make a large number of them. They are all similar, and the software is only one software. So maybe you get a better cost for the cross correlation at the end. So let's say I am not a specialist and I don't feel able to give an advice, but this idea of having a number of horns associated with classical receivers and over with cross correlation is good. It is with the idea of calibration too, but that is.
Is it working? Can Steve hear me?
Yes, it's working.
Okay. So I had some communication with Ian Brown. Is it, was ill last week, but I mean, and he would have liked to have been here. But I had some communication with him this afternoon, and I told him what I'd said about the correlation receiver, and I mean I still agree with what. Well, I think I agree with what Jeff and Steve are saying personally, because I'm just worried that analysing the data will be, we just don't want to make that any more difficult than we have to, and it just could be that we spend years and years trying to eke the signal out of the bad data that's caused by a single radiometer. But I had forgotten something, that the original plan was to do a correlation receiver against the sky. And the current design for a correlation receiver is to do it against a Colfet. And Ian had some concern that maybe that won't work as well as we think it will. And so we should just bear that. I mean, that's something, I'm slightly contradicting myself. So that, I mean, the big concern is that the data will, the data will take a long time to eke out the signal. It might be possible out of a single radiometer, but it will be difficult. The Colfet, well, I mean, I've no experience of it, but Ian, I'm just relaying what Ian said, and well, so that's just slightly in the opposite direction. Yeah, I mean, I think doing a test.
Maybe a lab test of the complete correlation
Yeah.
receiver with the cold FET
Yeah.
source.
Well, I
And the 1 over F spectrum of that
Yeah.
would tell us what we want to know, right?
the only thing that, I agree that test should be done. I mean, it's almost a sort of a given that should be done.
Sure.
But there is an additional worry that test might convince us that something will work when it won't in reality, because ultimately we are going down, that will be for a limited noise level. It will, at the noise level that we are wanting to do these observations is integration, many hours of integration on each pixel. So we just have to be a bit careful there, that's all.
That was the main reason why I put the two possibilities in the morning, the two designs that opened up what we've been thinking. Manchester has the digital backend that can probe the 1 over F behavior of the full system, but doesn't have the horns. And Ian took two transitions back to Manchester, and they have two Magic Tees that they are designed there. We don't have the digital backend here, but we have everything else in place. So before we decide, and the reason why I suggested going to the simple radiometers is exactly the reason why Richard mentioned that we are not sure that we have a stable enough Colfet to be the fourth entrance on the Magic T. That goes in the same line. If we have a simple radiometer, it cannot do a continuous wave calibration that's stable enough to get the full receiver stable, and then you'll be swamped by 1 over F if you don't have the continuous wave calibration. At this point, if we have a reasonably stable Colfet, that would work. If we have a very stable continuous wave signal, that would work for a simple radiometer. But if you remember my last slide, more work is required on both. We have to evaluate both. I agree that being swamped by 1 over F will make kill us in the very end. I haven't thought of that, but after lunchtime, talking to Jeff and Richard, I'm backing off, and I'm on the side of the simple radiometer, and I've been convinced by that for a long time, maybe a few months. But if we fail to get a good science with a simple radiometer, maybe we don't have a second chance to get money for a full correlation receiver. So we have to be very careful when we decide where to go at this point. I still have to think more about it and talk more with people about it.
We can do a lab test of the two techniques with the CW source and cold FET in the correlation receiver, and measure 1 over F knees of the two. At least in the lab, you'll know whether the two compare well.
radiometer by the end of July. We, as Jeff said, we were planning to test the simple radiometer by the end of July to have the full horn, transitions and everything else attached to our SPI. So we can do at least to a first assessment of the performance. We have 4 mini circuit amplifiers and 4 Chinese filters, which are not as good as the Rich-Radcliffe filters, but they are okay. We can have, let's say, okay performance for the Magic T, and have it put all together. That can be done in a couple of weeks.
So I think probably this will be presented tomorrow in the pipeline, but I'm assuming that the Bingo team, you guys have already a good capability in simulating the science you want to acquire, right? So it's possible for you to measure the performance of your receiver in the lab, get the power spectra and noise properties, inserting some pipeline that will tell you if you have a reasonable chance to do a good science in 1 year integration time or something, right?
Right.
Okay. So I think that will for sure help you in having a responsible decision regarding what receiver to use. But then I have to agree that it's common. I think common sense that if you already have one that's more expensive than the other one, probably the more expensive one is a better choice.
Just a quick comment before Richard says. I mean, if we think about how the full construction process goes, the radiometer or the full correlation receiver may be the last piece of equipment we put there. We can have everything else done while we are testing and checking for the best configuration, because that will be the last piece that before you turn on the instrument. And we can keep testing and checking for 1 more year. So there will be plenty of time to get the best choice. We'll start working that as soon as we get back to São José, and we have to keep in close contact with Ian, because he's doing something. It's very complementary what we are doing at INPE and what Ian is doing in Manchester. We are doing complementary things. So.
So can I just?
May I comment, please?
Could I just say something about Rodrigo's point? I mean, obviously we should simulate it, and indeed we have simulated something like this, not necessarily for Bingo, and it did work. But the problem with simulating 1/f is that just getting the power spectrum right does not mean that you've got the exact noise characteristics correct. That's the problem. Simulating, it's a bit like simulating Gaussian random noise. That's very easy to do. But anything that's slightly non-Gaussian, exactly how you do that is a bit more complicated, and the same is true with 1/f. So the concern would be that we have simulated it. The concern is that the simulation that we have of 1/f noise is too simplistic. That's all.
Can I please comment? Yeah. Sorry, I can't tell if you can hear. Maybe I'll switched off my camera. I don't know if it helps. Getting to be dark. It's 9 o'clock at night here. I wanted to comment after Alex about the fact that the receiver is the last thing that goes in, but just to hammer on again about software development, you really can't separate the receiver development from all the software that's required to deal with the signal afterwards. the last day and plug in a receiver and say, there's your signal, do something with it. So I think it's not quite correct to talk about delaying the integration of the receiver as the last thing, and then you just plug it in and things will get going. The software has to be developed alongside with it, and the software depends on the entire system, how the whole system works together. They're entangled and take to follow that kind of philosophy. You should really think of the receiver development along with the software development for the signal and signal processing and data analysis all together.
Alex, is it possible to put a few horns as they get ready and test the receivers in the site? Because it will take time to have all the horns, but you can put a few of them there and test some of the receivers and see what happens.
One thing I would say is that I don't see a showstopper here. There's a decision to be made about what is the best way to make a stable receiver, CW injection versus correlation technology. And you can do lab tests and eventually maybe a test of a few examples on site and make a decision. But one of the two of them will be the best, and you'll make the decision to go forward with that. I would see no delay of construction that should occur because of this branch point in the decision making, right? So that's an important point to make. There's no showstopper here. We're going to use the best technology we can find, and we're going to take some time to find the best one. But pouring concrete and building reflectors and starting construction of feeds, I think there's no reason I see to delay that at all.
Okay, it's clear that we're going to have to say something in the report about this choice, right? It's an important one. But let me stay in the same subject, but, is there anything else regarding the design of the telescope that concerns you? Because there was this timeline data, and you had some bottlenecks, right? And choosing the receiver was one of them. Is there anything else that concerns you regarding the design, or you're done with the optics, the horns? You have all the plans for starting production of the telescope. Yeah, I asked for the team.
Well, I think that generally speaking, the design of actually the structure of the kind of honeycomb that is being proposed seems to be the most stable, safe, and cheap. So we have all the qualities that are desired for this structure. The optics has been solved as far as I can say. I think it's very complex, but in a sense straightforward job that has been performed up to the end. So now we know the form of the distribution of the horns and the mirror. Is that right? So in principle, the general structure of the telescope, to my mind, is fixed. We don't have to do anything. So the main question is how many horns you can do so that you have a good Nyquist. I don't know, they say 2.5 in order to have the good redundancy to obtain data. And if you can do that even spending such and such amount of money with a correlator receiver. So the question is, can we get a nice Nyquist doing this honeycomb and providing a Nyquist, which is correct, and a correlator receiver? I think the answer is yes, but that's to be confirmed. Felipe is going to talk more about tomorrow. I'm not. There's another discussion that I don't want to bring to today because he is one of the persons that is pushing the other way. Is an ongoing discussion. If we do the honeycomb in a way that you can move up and down the horns, or if it is sufficient just to move around an axis in order to make observations at a bigger angular scale in both directions. This is not very clear to me either, and I think this is a question maybe I prefer to postpone for tomorrow, but if someone wants to say something, I think I discuss a lot with Alex also. He has also his opinions and insights about that. And,
we'll maybe leave it for tomorrow.
Let me ask one more question. This is a more practical one. Let's assume that finally you're done with choosing your receiver. You decided that that's the way to go. Configuration, everything is ready. The team has decided that's exactly the system they want to build. Regarding providers, how confident are you are that you have already identified who will build what? Are you already in touch with industry? Do you know exactly? Are you confident that everything that is in your design can actually, it's just a question of money, and then you have, you buy and you get it, or you still have to identify providers for some of the critical parts of the telescope?
This is something we've been thinking about for over a year, maybe longer. We searched 6 companies to get to the company that is building the horn. That's the best price and the best quality that we could find. We didn't find anybody else who wanted to attack the problem, actually. No, there was a single company that wanted to do it, and they already started the second unit. So we are fine with the horns. We don't think we have a problem. The company that did the polarizer, Magic Tees and everything was one out of 4 that we contacted. And he's not the fastest guy to deliver, but as Chris Radcliffe and Ian said, the mechanical work is excellent. So we are not worried about the quality of the units. One thing that may delay but not stop it is that they may delay, they may deliver horns and components slightly slower than we want, say 1 every 2 weeks. We don't think they will do it, but 1 every 3 weeks I think it's possible, and polarizer, Magic Tees and transitions, they do much faster than the horn. That's simpler. And once it starts the production line, it's okay. What we haven't done yet is to search a company that will encapsulate the receiver. We will not do it at INPE. We have to find someone. We have 4 companies that we contacted, but we have to make sure that they will do it in time and with the quality that we want. For the receiver, we still don't have a good supplier. We have 4 good candidates that they work for the space program at INPE, so they know what they're doing. So they are on the space community. But we have to make sure that they deliver in time. This is I don't have an answer for that yet. But we will have in very soon, as soon as we do not even need to decide correlation, full correlator, or simple radiometer, because encapsulating after that will be a single thing. So we can start doing that like as of now when we get back to São José in a week. Digital backend, the supplier is Digicom if you want the Roach. and RPG in Germany if you want the off-the-shelf solution. So we have supply. I think we are receivers. Main thing are amplifiers, which come from Skyworks and Eddie Blackhurst in Manchester, who does the boxing. Filters come from Chris Radcliffe, that has done that for many, many years, and he's been collaborating with this part of the telescope section for maybe about a year. He's been to Brazil in March. The final test we did together, Ian, myself, Mike, and Chris, for 2 weeks in March. So the only question is the boxing, the encapsulating of the full receiver, which we don't have a supplier yet. Assuming that the idea that we've been discussing 2 weeks ago of making the parabolas of panels, like we saw in some places in GMRT, they have structures, not exactly as we are planning, but they have panels. We have the company that did the antennas for BDA, and they do telecommunications antennas for 13, 14, 15 meters. We have to make sure that they can deliver panels with the proper bending, the proper positioning of the parabola and the hyperbole, and that we can assemble that in place. That we have contacted them, but we are waiting for the final design to ask for a quote and for a time delivery for this. We same case of the box. We have 3 companies that potentially can do it, but we have to get to them with designs. That's a mechanical design. So check it and see if you can do it for me. So this is, I don't think that will be a problem, because they did that for Savant, for BDA, they did some other stuff, like 50 meters. So I don't think it will be a problem, but I cannot say for sure. I have to get there with the design and see what they tell me. But I think it's very likely that they will do it.
Well, the 40-meter radio telescope in Argentina that was built 50 years ago, it was also with panels, and they did it on site. They have just the shape, and they did it by themselves, so it shouldn't be terrible difficult to do. Yeah.
That's what informal conversation with this company indicates, that my impression is that will not be a problem. If you do 1 meter by 1 meter panels, since the wavelength is 30 centimeters, that will not be a problem. Informally, I feel that they will do it, but once you get with the design, to show them a design, things may change. So I can get back to the review panel in 2 or 3 months and tell you exactly what the status is with this.
We were talking a little bit about RF shielding of the back-end spectrometer so that it doesn't emit noise that would be detected by the receiver array. Not much was presented about this, but you just need to make sure that the screen room that the back end lives in is quiet enough. You would hate to bring to this very quiet site your own noise. And many radio projects have done this, not had a sufficiently screened screen room. But this is technology you can buy, screen room technology. They can build them at any size. And but I didn't hear anything about it, but I just have to be very careful about the level of shielding of the screen room that the correlator lives in, or receiver array, or back end.
Before this design with the control cabin, that's why I didn't put anything. We had been looking at containers with the proper, like Faraday cage. But talking to Luciano and Elcio, it seems that the company who will build the control cabin, they can do the metal structure as a Faraday cage while they build it. So I gave up thinking about this for this point. And then we can check when it's done again and make sure that you have something inside. You go to site and do the testing if it's shielding or not. Initially, it would be containers, but I think the construction is a better solution.
Any other question from the meetings? There is Steve, Renato, and Elisa.
So just make sure that if this is as part of the construction, they're making the screen room, then a construction company is building you a screen room. But you need in the contract a RF performance spec, right? So 100 dB isolation of a 1 watt transmitter at 1 gigahertz inside the screen room measured outside, right? So you need to figure out what that spec is, and then spec it so the construction company is bound to. If they forget to tape the seams and then they put drywall all over it, it's going to cost them a lot of money. But you have to make sure they pay that money. Right, yeah.
So I guess now the advisors are going to meet in the room on the second floor, and we can stay here talking bad things about you.
Should I stay on this channel for the teleconference, or do I switch?
Se ele fica aqui para reunião. Só fala para ele explicar aí.
Rodrigo is going to call you in another Google Meetings, okay? Because it's another room.
Okay. Okay, so I will sign off this one.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Só confirma uma coisa. Estávamos eu e